Hello, everybody. Hi. Let's go here. Let's see what we have. Okay, cool.
Hello there.
Hi, how's it going? Just gonna.
Very good. And you?
Good, man. Just like I need some more
How are you
rest, but
going?
other than that's good. Need to sleep more. All right. I'm just gonna start this. So today we're gonna be talking about ice. Normally, like in the past 2 months, I did the ice in the first day of the week, and then the painting of the albedo in the second. But I think it was more logical to do that way. And then we kind of like already did some painting yesterday. I posted online. If you guys didn't see, check it out. A bunch of pictures of renders of my wife, and then and also let's see if I have any. And so those guys here. And then the last image I posted, that list, is actually the albedo color. She's changed in here. She looks different. So there is one right here. That's the progress of that albedo color. And yesterday the question was actually, it's like, why am I painting a little bit orange, the map, right? But you can tell that in the render it's turning kind of like a light pink, right? It's because of that color correction node that I use. And we can go over that again today because we are going to be talking about the shaders. So I'm going to be opening the shader network for the teeth, show some of the geometry for the teeth as well, how I'm creating the transparency, open all those shaders. So I think it's going to be interesting today to actually just open up about every single shader. It's like you're going to open like the skin shader, what's the current state of it, so you can copy all the parameters. And then we're going to do the same for the eyes. So I'm going to show you how the eyes are structured now. It changed a little bit in relation to the last two classes. And one thing that was very interesting about this exercise with her yesterday was that I always noticed that her eyes, it looks like she's looking, it's the opposite of a crossed eye, right? Kind of like looks like it's divergent, kind of like you look like in different directions a little bit. And I always thought it was a very subtle thing, and I even know I was able to capture it in this, right? But the interesting thing is, like, her eyes look like they are kind of like going different directions and everything. But the funny thing is that I had the carunculus here. The caruncula was pretty long, was coming all the way to here. And when the caruncula was coming all the way to here, the eyes looked absolutely normal. It looked like she didn't have that effect at all. So it's just like very normal. But as soon as I started looking at her references, and I noticed that her caruncula was very, very small, just in a little corner here. It doesn't have a lot of blend. It's just a tiny little dot in there. And then when I actually reduced it, then this effect got amplified, which is kind of wild to me because I thought like, yeah, that's so weird, right? Because you have to imagine that, it's like this is what you see. It's like when you see from a distance, you're going to see the whites of the eye, you're going to see the iris, and then you're going to see this blending here, which basically the color might be even similar to the skin around it. So it fills up that area. It looks like it doesn't have that effect, right? Now, what's happening here as well is that I changed the transparency of this object here. I'm going to show you how I have it set. And when I changed the transparency of it, he ended up like getting a little artifact. So from this angle here, it kind of works. But then when you look at that one, it's eating up the entire thing. So it's kind of like it disappeared from there. So in that case, I think if I add it a little bit longer, like I have in this side around here, that effect's going to be minimized. I want to have a little bit of that effect, but it's a little bit amplified because the caruncula is actually not singing in there. So I'm going to be doing that. But it's a very curious thing I just want to share, it's like if you reduce this, you're probably going to get more of that effect. If you make it bigger, it's more likely it's going to look like a normal eye. So yeah, I had no idea about that, but the experiment was kind of interesting to observe that. Same from the side here. You see, like it's completely like you barely can see it, and there as well. I think the transparency went too far. But and I'm going to be showing actually another thing. That's the lens that I'm using inside of the it's like this area here in front of the sclera. So like the cornea here, I have a little kind of like a squash disc in there, and that's actually, it's almost like a sphere that I deformed to fit in that area. and it's working like a lens. So that's giving me a nicer caustic effect into the iris. So that's why I added in there. And the refraction is changing as well. It looks like a different type of, it has more depth in there, I think, especially with the light eyes, like their light color eye. So about the eyes, let's start with some theory here. So it's like we already spoke a little bit about this, but all those values here are copied from, you know, information you can find on the internet. For example, like the structure of the eye here, right? So when you look at the size of the eyeball, right, like the diameter, it's about like 24 millimeters diameter. And then for the iris itself, it's about 12 millimeters. So basically like half of it. In here, it says like the cornea is typically about 11.5 millimeters, but the iris is a little bit longer. So it's like 12 millimeters. And then there is another thing that's called the pupillary distance. So from the pupil, right, the distance between pupils. And then in this in the Wikipedia, you can find there's like a distance average for female and male. And that's about like 61.7 and then 64, like between female and male. So like an average of like, let's say like 63 would be an average between the two of them for the distance of the pupil. So with all that information in hand, I translated to the scene here, which basically shows that information. So the iris itself, it's about 12 millimeters from here to here, right? So like 1.2 centimeters, and then 24 all the way to the edge here, right? So 24. And then the distance here on average, because I have a slight rotation in the eyeballs, I normally do like about like 2 degrees outwards slightly. And I explained why before, which is basically like if you do this type of rotation, it rotates outwards a little bit, you prevent that effect that, you know, it's like if you do like a straight 90-degree view of the eye, it's basically like it's going to look cross-eyed when you render. So, and when you do this kind of rotation, we actually forced your character to look at the distance. So it looks like someone has some thoughts, you know, it's like it looks like the character is thinking about something and is looking far away. So that's why it's cool to have a little bit of that rotation, you know, it's like you introduce a little bit more life when you do that, right? So, and it's all about the soul, right? And this is the technical stuff that helps with the soul, right? Like this kind of like little tricks we use. In terms of the eyeballs themselves, like structure-wise, let's open my ZBrush file here, and you're gonna see how simple it is. So the only difference here is that I'm adding, like I said, like I have an extra object inside of it now, and so we're gonna be looking at that in Maya. But the eye itself, the structure is like this. So geometry-wise, let's click this one. You see how I have my eye in there? So if you start your sphere, for example, like in Maya, right, and you just start subdividing, you are not going to get this type of topology that I have in here. And this topology here is important because you don't want to create like anything that has like any stars in the middle or any possibility of pinching, right? Because if you subdivide this, you're always going to see some little pinching and stuff. And because we need this area to be like a mirror, it has to be completely perfect. That's why I made the topology this way, right? So I think like obviously you guys all have experience, but I know some of you guys don't have a lot of experience in the class. So just so you know, if you go to your create polygon primitives and you create like a sphere, for example, right? Then I'm just gonna grow it in here so you know how I'm doing it. So that's basically like if I go back right here where you have the attributes for the construction of that sphere. So I have it there. I'm gonna put like subdivisions at 8. Before I do that, I'm gonna do something here. Let's do a copy of this object first. And then let's move both of them to like 40 here so I can actually know where to find it. And then let's go up. So I know it's 40. I'm gonna put 80 here so I remember that's double that. And so I'm gonna just go back with this one here. I'm gonna add subdivisions like only 8. So it's gonna be 8. And maybe like some more, let's maybe do 12. No, 8 is good. Let's start with 8. So basically what I'm doing to create a topology, I'm actually removing some of those edges here. So let's see, if the front is right here, I'm gonna just click this one, this one, this one, and this one. I'm gonna delete it. And then the back, it doesn't matter because it's going to be in the back of the eye. You're never going to see it, right? But I'm going to delete it anyway. So now if you subdivide it, now you get that little topology in there. So instead of like I have a star or something, that's going to be much nicer now, right? So let's say I want to subdivide this thing to create my sphere now, the eyeball. But the thing is, like, since I have like very low, you know, it's like a poly count in here. If I subdivide this, it's going to look a little oval like this, right? Because I don't have enough sides now. So what I can do here to correct, that's why I create this copy here. I normally create a copy of it, and I can even subdivide further. For example, if you go to mesh and then smooth, so I'm going to smooth it further like that. And I can even create another copy of this. And then I can make it a little bit smaller. And I can actually use those values that you were talking about before to find, for example, you have to measure it, right? Because I have it measuring there 24 and then 12. So you're going to have to do the same to get like the sides in here at 24. And then this area here, which is going to be the cornea, is going to have the little bulge like this. And that's going to have like this entire radius in here is going to be about 12. So like 24 for the eyeball and 12 this one. But I'm just sketching here, so I'm not measuring right now. So I just add that one as a little buffer in there so I can actually see what I'm doing, right? So let me bring this one up to 80. Oops, 80. Right, and then I'm going to subdivide this because this is basically like just the new topology I want to create, right? I just removed those edges. So I'm going to just, I'm going to subdivide it once. So smooth, and just move this guy up around here at 80. And now I can grow it a little bit right there. And I can just say, okay, I can copy, I'm going to click this one here, the one that has high resolution. And then I'm going to click this guy here, which I can actually just like scale a little bit, just get closer very, very slightly like that. But just to make sure that I have a perfect match, I can do this and then select with Shift the other one. Oops. Shift Control. And then I can just say, go to Mesh and then Transfer Attributes. And you can just project the whole thing. So vertex position on, and then no topology, so like world. And that's about the closest point or closest normal, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to click it. So now it made a match. So basically like this one is a perfect match to the other sphere now. So now I can even like, if I wanted to, I can remove this one, but I'm not going to do this. I'm going to just move it down for now. So I know that's a match. And now I can actually create a little topology in here, right? So I can do this. I can click, let's see, this little guy here, which is basically like, let me see if I can find it here because I always use my bar and I don't even remember where to find it. And everything, every time my updates, you know, they change things, change position. So let's see, for example, edit mesh. So let's see, it's under, oh, you see, I cannot find without my little menu. But that's basically like you're gonna have to add some edges, mesh tools maybe. Yeah, insert edge loop. So basically like this is the one. So under mesh tools, insert edge loop. To me, everything is so spread out in here. I hate the way that they split stuff and everything is kind of related, but I don't understand the logic behind it, to tell you the truth, but it's there. So mesh tools and then insert edge loop. So if you do that, if you double click that or get just like the little square here, the option box. So I'm gonna go insert this one. So you can see you have like a relative distance from edge, and then you have equal distance from edge. If you have a relative, that means like when I click this, it's gonna be changing. Look, it's gonna get more square, then more round as I move it, right? But if I want to lock and keep like a perfect line, then you can just do equal distance. So if you click this one here, now it's gonna preserve that relationship, and I can go all the way there, right? So you can do this kind of stuff to just like get the edge of it a little bit more in the ballpark. So let's get this guy here. Let's see. This is something I don't think I did in the other classes, just like to show for whoever never did this before. So for example, like now I have that little buffer to recover anything. I can just like remodel this a little bit. I'm gonna select all those guys. I'm gonna shrink them a little bit like that. And maybe get yeah, get those guys here and then expand them a little bit. So now it has a like kind of like similar distance between them, right? Like not perfect, but I mean something that we can use. And then let's bring this one back. Oops, 80. And I can just like do the same thing. So select this one first, and then Control Shift, select that one. And I can just say Mesh, Transfer Attributes, same deal. So all those settings, just press it, and then it should pop, and then snap to the surface in there. So I'm gonna delete history, and now let's bring back this little guy here. So let's see if you have something like this. Now the only thing you have to do is basically like you can create another set of edge loops in here, and then and just like bring this whole thing up, or you can just project now and see what happens. For example, let's see if I have this guy, oops, this guy right there. Let's bring it up. So let's see if we need a little bulge like this. Obviously measured, right? If you're doing it there, you're gonna be measuring it. And let's see the edges here. So a little bit more like this. So basically you just like, you can just select some edges in here. Like, you know, it's like maybe like select like a few polygons and then shift. And then, yeah, just expand the mask. So let's see. Yeah, around there. So basically like what we have to do, you have to select this one here first. So you're gonna have, you see like you select the object or the, or the, how you call it, the edges and you know, it's like all the components, right? So either the object or the component. So you select the components, and then you're gonna click this guy here first. So I'm gonna do this guy, and then the components are gonna select this guy. Let's see if it's selected in there. You know what? Better than this. I think we're gonna do it better. Let's see, it's gonna be easier to understand as well. So let's get this one. I'm just gonna merge those two objects. We can just combine them. So edge, combine, combine. There you go. So now if we project it, it should get a little bit more in the ballpark. So I can do here, let me just get this, this, and this, and then expand it like that. And then I'm gonna just scale it just to get a little bit more of the ballpark. And then if I need more edges in there, I can add some. So for example, like around here, let's see if we can just add some edge right here. And then let's try get this guy and this guy, mesh, transfer attributes, and then snap. Let's see what we got. Yeah, so now we got like a little bit more of that shape. So that's kind of like the way I created that eyeball. I normally have like those little shapes, like a high resolution meshes, waiting because, you know, it's like at any time if something goes off model, I can just bring it back, you know, so I can just re-snap it. So it kind of like this, the way that I actually started this sphere. So instead of like having that little weird star at the bottom, right, that we had something that's more clear. So I'm gonna delete it because we don't need it, but that's basically like the way I started those guys. And then obviously added more subdivision levels and everything. So going back to ZBrush, so that's basically the mesh I have right there, right, with a little bulge. And then I'm gonna subdivide it a few times. You're gonna see what I have in terms of geometry here. So I have like all this stuff hand painted, right? Because that's the fun part, is to hand paint things. So the form itself looks like this. And to create those veins, first I started like very manually. I did a lot of those veins very manually using like the standard brush, right? So just like hand painted very carefully. The resolution I have in here is like a little bit less than 5 million polygons, so it's 4.5 million. So it's not much. But one thing that I did after I did this was to, I mentioned this in the previous class as well, to add like micro veins to the nose and to the eyes. And like when you need like micro veins, I thought that would be fun to actually find something in nature that emulated that, you know, it's like the veins. And then I found like lightning, right? So I found some pictures of lightning, and then I captured one and brought to Photoshop and just like made like black and white, and then transform into a brush. So I should have in here. Let's see if I have it. I never find anything in there because I have so many these days. But let's see if I can find pimple random. They build up on intro veins one. Yeah, this one. So basically, like it looks like this. See, like it's even a little noisy in there, but it's basically like lightning that I found, and then it's just like turning it like super contrasty black and white, and then I'm using that one. So RGB in here, I'm gonna turn it off. You can see how it works. So I'm gonna sculpt right here in the lens that it's a no-no, right? You never touch this area here. It has to be like a mirror, right? Like that's where you know, it's like the lens is. So basically, like if you have any imperfection here, you are not gonna see straight, right? Like you're gonna have some distortion in your vision. So that's why it has to be like a mirror in here. But then you have all those microstructures around it. You're gonna need all those little veins. But to demonstrate the brush, it looks like this. Look. So basically, like it has this cool little patterns in there, right? And then, so I just, to sculpt them in here, a lot of those are like big versions of that. So for example, like for those big ones, I just like did like a big drawing like that. Just like to go all the way, right? Avoiding this area, obviously. And then when I got a little closer in here, I start doing like those little ones. So you're gonna see some of them. And then you're gonna see those old ones I have here hand painted. See, like very, very simple, those guys here. So it's a combination of both. It's using a little brush to save me time, and then some of the other stuff. And even those guys here, they're kind of crappy looking. This is old school right here. This is this alpha here. It comes with ZBrush. That's the alpha 22. Looks like this. So you're gonna find some of those crappy ones in here as well. But this lightning actually is the one I use the most these days, like for micro veins and thing. I'm probably gonna use on Jessica. So it works really great. And I'm pretty sure you can find the same one on the internet if you search for like lightning images, something like this. But either one should work, you know. Then to paint the eyeball itself, what I did, let me show you like without the material here. So the colors are super simple, as you can tell, but it has some variation, right? So I don't have a lot of, you know, super detailed stuff. If you see like pictures of eyeballs, like, you know, it's like super highly detailed, super high realistic renders that people do, they are using a map actually that was extracted from photographs and looks beautiful. You know, it has much more detail than this, but this is a very loose and effective way to just like have what you need in there. It's just a matter of like picking the right colors, you know. So in my case here, I think like the eyeball starts like this, but I think I'm tweaking those colors and desaturating a little bit inside of Maya. So it's not like you can trust the color here completely. But I'm gonna show you how it looks in here, and also what I have in terms of the tweaks in the shader, so you can actually understand what's going on. But you see, like instead of like using just like pink or super red and, you know, it's like blood, I kind of like added a very desaturated version here. So if I pick this color, it's a very desaturated, like a red 160, green 117, and then blue 112. And then I start adding some more saturated colors like this one, right? So you got a little bit like 158, 94, 87. But then I get some areas like this that are much more orange yellow, kind of desaturated as well. So like 230, 171, and 151. And then, so basically, like I noticed this, like when you look at some photographs, you know, it's like there is this tone of like very slight yellow in some of the eyeballs, not all of them. Some of them look actually a little bluish, but again, like I can color correct some of this stuff, like in using that node in Maya. So, and then when I was painting the veins, obviously you're gonna need a perfect match, right? Like the color and the volume. So I would just like add a RGB, for example, and then pick a color like a dark red. Let's see, like something like this. And then you basically like you're going to sculpt and paint at the same time, right? When you apply your if I do this way, let's see, with another type of shader in here. So if you do like a, you know, it's like something like this, you're basically like painting and sculpting at the same time, right? So very simple, you know, it's like a very simple concept. So most of those guys are basically like this little brush, and the other ones are hand painted, and, you know, not a lot of mystery, but visually, if you guys want to have it, you know, as a visual reference, that's basically what it is. You know, there's not much involved. It's kind of like an egg, right? So the center area here is going to be completely transparent when it comes to Maya, right? So I'm not caring too much about it. I left the white in here because I thought it would be better to make the transparency and create that little halo around here in the iris itself, right? Like sometimes you get that little dark halo around the iris instead of painting right here, because I want that to show as a deep kind of shadow, you know? It's a combination of a shadow and a little bit of the color in the iris instead of having something that's kind of like applied to the surface of the eye. I wanted something that looks like it has multi-layers. That's why I didn't apply here. So that's white. Now let's look at the iris itself. The iris, it was painted like this. Let's move from this. So let's turn off the color because the color is very crappy actually. I'm gonna show you how it looks like. The color was super simple. Actually, I painted a new one for Jessica because the color is basically useless in here. I just used this color as a base color. I'm gonna show you what I have here. And then for all those characters I'm using, I actually use like a circular ramp in Maya to actually colorize them. So basically like I changed the colors in Maya itself. But except for Jessica, with her I actually had to paint a brand new map. But see, like it's kind of blotched and weird. There's some greens in there, so it's kind of useless. There's a little bit of the detail in here. What I did to paint it was basically like I selected by cavity, and then I just added a bunch of different colors, you know, it's like in different places of the cavity. And then that's why you get some of the forms in there baked, right? Like kind of like it looks a little ghosty. But you see, like it's a very simple map that's, you know, it's like, yeah, it's better if you can actually paint a decent map. I might do this at some point, but not right now. So let's go to the material and let's turn off this one here. Let's see how this iris was built. So basically, like, in the past, I would always have like a full-on globe, right, with the iris sculpted at the front, and that's going to be that would be inside of the cornea here. But because I'm not going to be seeing any of that stuff, remember that this stuff here, starting here, is going to start getting transparent, right? So right here, I'm going to actually create a blending between the sclera and the iris by using a transparency map. And right in the middle is going to be completely transparent. And then around here, I can actually calculate and then tweak how far I want this blend to happen. So you can get more of that little halo that I mentioned before, or less of it. Can get a little bit more of an abrupt, sharper line, or something that's more diffuse. I like the one that's more, you know, it's like diffuse and it looks nicer. You know, it looks more natural when it's not like a cut, because otherwise it looks very fake, you know. So back to the iris in here. So it started with the disc like that. And the disc originally, obviously, I didn't have any of this detail in here. It was simply a disc like this, which is kind of like a mini volcano, right? So I have like the pupil in there that was just like extruded from it, like that. So if I show you the wireframe, it looks like this, right? So just extruded. And then this entire thing here was kind of like a mini volcano. So you went down slightly, and then there's a little border in here that goes up. And then on top of that, I start sculpting everything. And I'm gonna share with you guys a video, and I'm gonna drop off this video in the folder today, together with this class here. You're gonna see two different videos after the class. One's gonna be this one of the construction of the iris, and the other one is gonna be the class itself. So I'm gonna show you a little preview of that video because it's gonna look it's basically like, you know, sculpting the whole thing from beginning to end. And then it's just slightly sped up, but not by much, right? Like it's, of course, like not by much. Yeah, it's sped up, but at least you're gonna see the whole process. How I started this whole thing here was with a radial sculpt, like a symmetry in ZBrush. So basically, like the radial stuff works like this. If you go to your transform, and you just see activate symmetry, you have radial in there, right? And my radial is set to 40 count. So basically, like here, if I want to sculpt like this little, you know, rays in there that I have like the little lightning, right? Basically, like I can sculpt like multiple at the same time by doing this, right? Because like it goes around, it's just like a radial thing. So that's how I started sculpting these little lines. So if I go back here, that's just like to block the forms. And then I go through this whole process here is using mostly of this stuff here is just like clay buildup. So you can set up, like put a little circle, for example, alpha 35 that I normally use. And then you can just like block the forms. And then you're gonna ask me like how I block the forms. So, well, looking at references, right? I'm gonna show you a bunch of different references and you can look. So I'm gonna just speed things up here so you can see. But this is the entire process that's recorded. So it's like from beginning to end. And then basically like my intention here was to create these little caves, right? Like you see, like each one of them has little caves in here. And then there's some micro structure that was added. And then this entire, like inside, I start blending those little caves in there into those little lines in the middle. And then I tried to add some, you know, bump map or whatever, like detail, but didn't quite work. So I moved on, and then here I started adding more stuff in the middle, and more and more. And this video here lasts for about 9 minutes, so it's plenty of stuff you can look at. And but the thing is, like, you have to find a reference that you actually like, right? Like, not every single eyeball is going to be the same. Like, not iris is going to be the same. So I have this folder here that I saved with a bunch of references for eyes. And for example, like if you search Google for like eye macro photography, right? Eyeball macro photography or something, you're gonna find a bunch of examples like this. So you see, this one is a very different type of structure. It has more pores in it, right? Like very porous right there. And then you're gonna see one thing that I noticed, and I don't know if it's impression. I mentioned this in the previous class, is that the brown eyes have this interesting simplified structure, right? It's porous and everything, but it doesn't have a ton of fibers, right? Like the fibers are kind of like, you know, a little spongy. But then when you get to the lighter eyes, it's a very different structure, right? Because you see, you have like all those tiny little rays, right? Like those tiny little structures, which makes a very different type of, you know, it doesn't have the same character as a brown eye. See another brown eye here, very, you know, not fibers, but very spongy looking. And then it has a little bit of that kind of stuff that I was adding in there. So it has the little caves in here, right? But it has much more detail, obviously. You could go to town and get much more of that stuff. And then there's this one here. So from this angle, I can tell that the inner part here, it has a little bit of a depth, right? So that's why it was kind of like sculpting as a little volcano. So it goes down, and then it goes down a little further, and then it goes to the hole in there. And then there's another one you can see from the, let's see, from the side. This one has a little bit of that. You can see the border in there when he starts mixing with the rest. It has a little bit of more of a border that's a little bit raised in there, right? And then this one here shows a little bit of that as well. So it has like a couple of layers. So it has like 1, 2, 3 little layers in there. So kind of like, and then goes down, right? So you can really see it going down right here, starting this area. So that's actually very helpful if you have that kind of shape, like you know, it's like you go down and then down, right? Like kind of like 2 steps in there, because if you have like the lighting hitting your eye, you're gonna get the caustic effects, right? And you're gonna be able to see the caustics. You know, it's like illuminating the eye. So normally, if you have the highlight happening on one side, you're gonna have the caustic in the opposite side, right? And you're gonna get this type of scattering happening right here as well. So so that's kind of like the way I see, like another blue one with a very different structure, right? Like not the same as we are seeing with the brown stuff. It's just like seems like a different type of structure inside. See, like they all have this micro little lines, and then you get to the brown. It's more like a rough, you know, another blue one, like micro lines and everything. And then you get to, this is kind of in between, right? It's kind of like a green, still like very much has the same structure as the blue eye, but it has a little bit of this stuff from the brown as well. It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of like a mix of the two of them. Simpler, like I said before, a little simpler as well, although it's like brownish green. Yeah, it's kind of like it has a little bit of both. It's green as well. And then the blue is just as tiny microstructures again. So it all depends on how you're going to be, you know, it's like what's the reference you're going to be using, right? But it seems like the blue eyes, you have much more of those little microstructures in there. In her case, I actually cheated that a little bit. Instead of like sculpting everything from scratch, I used the same structure that I had for my eyeball, and I just added a bump map to break things down further. So you know, it's like I'm not going to resculpt this because, like I said, it's all step by step in the video. You can just pause at any time and see how I sculpted it. But I would say like just look for references. You know, look for micro photography for eyes, and then the brushes I used. Those are basically like the default, the standard brush with a little bit of a point, like the one I'm using like straight away, right? Like the one I have named the Carve, right? So basically like it's the standard brush with a little Alpha 39, blah, blah, blah. And also the clay buildup, right? The clay buildup for most of those forms is all clay buildup. You're gonna see in the video. And then when it comes to the side view right here, that's the type of stuff I mentioned in there. You have like this kind of like it goes down in here and then goes down again a little deeper, right? I could make like even a better transition between those steps, but it's working very nicely for me. And then those little lines I added here are some of those extra steps that I noticed in some of the references. Remember that this stuff is gonna be right where the blend is gonna happen. So the blend is gonna start around here and it's gonna blend all the way around here. So you're going to be able to see a little bit of this structure underneath the transparency of this the sclera, right? So so basically, like if I put both pieces together, they go like this with the transparency. So look right there. Let's add some color here. So basically, like in color that I want to. Actually, that one no color. So and then I can just add like a, you know, it's like if I click this guy, you can see it right there. So from the side. You see, like I have to be very careful to have a little bit of a gap between this area here and this area. And remember that around here, the transparency is going to be completely, almost completely over. So you're going to have transparency from all the way here, right? Completely transparent. And then around here, I'm going to start fading into nothing, right? Like into no transparency at all. So basically what you're going to be seeing is a combination of, when you see that little dark ring around the iris, it's a combination of the shadow that's going to be created by the area that's not transparent anymore. So it's going to have a little shadow combined with a little bit of a color, slightly darker in this border here. But the thing is, like, make sure you don't have an intersection, right? Because you don't want anything like the iris leaking over the surface of the sclera, right? But it has to be close enough that doesn't have a huge gap, right? So that's what's important. So basically, like, that's the way I model. Like, so this is the model. It's very, you know, straightforward, simple, right? Like the geometry is like, there's nothing, you know, it's just a matter of like how you sculpt it. And so this guy here, same deal, right? So it's just like very simple geometry. And then I have the carunculate here, which has a very crappy texture that I never changed. So it's still pretty crappy. It looks like this, look, the very rough veins. But the thing is, like, I'm adding so much transparency and altering the, you know, it's like changing the view, the look of it, right? Like when I bring to Maya. So in Maya, I'm actually making everything very subtle and very faint color. You know, it's like it's almost like blend. And then there's a lot of transparency that happens all the way from here all the way to here. So all the stuff goes transparent. And the fact that I painted some color in there, you see, like I have veins going all the way to this area, is because when I added a transparency between this object and that object, I wanted to be able to see a multi-layer of veins. So for example, this one fades to nothing, disappears. And then you're gonna see the veins below, and some of the veins gonna be in the transparency still. So basically, like you see kind of like 2 layers in there. So it adds up, you know, and then if you do the blend correctly, it's gonna look nice. So in terms of the geometry for the carunculate itself, also very, very simple. It goes like, oops, this one, like this. So like it's super low res, and it's actually a little appendix like this. It has to be like the double-sided because of the, you know, you want to make sure that you have the refraction and the scatter happening the correct way. So that's why I made like things like watertight and that way. But see, it's not even conformed to the eyeball correctly. I have to do this for every single model. I have to conform very closely, but without the paying attention to this border here. It has to be outside of the model, right? Because I want the transparency to actually blend the two of them. So if I bring this one down here slightly, I want to make sure that the border is just slightly lifted like this. So when I have the transparency, it's going to blend perfectly in there, right? So this is the kind of stuff I'm going to have to do. Like for each model, it's a little bit different, right? In her case, I have the caruncula being a little bit shorter. Some people have like different shapes for the caruncula, right? So I'm going to have to, you know, see how their hers look like. This is just like used from the old guys I'm sculpting at this point, and so it's probably like not the best fit for her. So I'm gonna have to look into that. And then moving to Maya, so I can see the UV set for all of this. So let's start with UVs before we dig into the shaders. So let's go here and let's turn off my grid. Let's go to the UVs. So I have this window, modeling editor, UV editor. So it's gonna see, it's very simple. It has to be always circular. So what I did, basically, like I split it in half, right? So my UV. So if you don't know how to do UVs in Maya, it's super simple, right? Like if you have an object like that, you can just go to your UV and you just say like apply like a planar projection, and you can just like say like in Z, and then you project straight away. So it's going to create like a projection for both like the front and the back all mixed together. After you do that, you can just like double click an edge right in the middle right here, and you can just say like cut right here, and then that's going to split both of them. And then you can just move the back of it to the side. The important thing is to actually have this one completely centered with your UV space. So if I look at here, right, it's completely centered with the UV space. And then since that part's not going to be visible unless she turned her eyes really, really exaggerated, I don't think even that, you know, it's like it's going to reveal the back of the eye, like more than, I don't know how many degrees. So I made it very, very tiny in here. So I'm not using a lot of UV space. And I'm using all this UV space for the front, right? So I can get all those veins super detailed and everything. And also it has to be circular like that because of I'm using like a circular ramp to be able to actually create the the blend between the sclera and the iris. So that's going to happen. So that's why I keep it with this type of UV, right? So that's the front of it. So let's look at this one so I don't mess with the center one. And they're all the same. They're just copies of each other. So let's look at the iris itself. You notice that the iris here is very high res as well, right? It's like by very high res, not that, it's like, it's not a lot. It's like 53,000 polys, right? So it's like not super high at all. It's just like, and then you might think like, why I'm bringing this resolution if I have the lowest resolutions in ZBrush, right? It's because, it's like it's still a little bit of a pain in the butt to deal with the, let me just turn off my shader like this. No, actually, let's turn off this actually. Using vector displacements, it's still a little bit painful. Each application uses a different setting, and then sometimes it's a little painful to do it. So basically, like if I have my lowest resolution here, I want to make sure that I export something that has enough support for the displacement to just ride on top of it. So if I have a resolution around here, I can see the caves in there, the little caves that I built. So basically, like if I displace from this point up, then at least it has support for everything. So I can get like a very similar result to the final one I have. That's just basically like around here, right? Just by using a slightly higher resolution. And then obviously you have to count the subdivision levels. Like this one is 1, so 2, 3, 4, so it's 4. So if I export my displacement maps, you can actually have to set this subdivision level here to 4 to match it, right? And then you export this mesh to Maya, and then the displacement generated is going to be just difference between this mesh and then whatever goes on top of it. So that's the way we sculpted the head anyway. And so it's just higher resolution here. So the intention is to actually have more support, so I don't need to use vector displacement. That's all it is. And then let's look at the UVs for this guy here. So window, modeling, UV. Let's see how it looks like. Oh, is it empty? This one is empty. I think maybe this is the copy. Oh, no, it's there. For some reason, it selected something else. No, it's there. Okay. So again, it's just like a circle, right? There's nothing special in here. What I did actually, I created this in was in ZBrush. So everything was created in ZBrush. Or actually, was it in ZBrush? Maybe it was here. The thing is, like, I'm not subdividing the UV. See, like, everything is a square. It's like every single one of those is square. And then obviously that can cause a little bit of an artifact. But because of the blend is so broad, the one I'm using, you shouldn't have a problem here. But I could potentially, like, if that becomes a problem, I might do this actually, is to smooth out this entire thing here, and get that a little bit better in this. But yeah, this is like the original one. I think when I subdivided, I didn't use the smooth, but in this case here, I think smooth would be better because of the the transparency. But again, it's such a subtle thing. The transparency is going to be like a large band right here. That's not going to be affecting too much. It's not going to create like those points in here. It's like, unless it's like you look really, really close, and I don't even think you can see even from close up. But yeah, if you're building from scratch, just try to make it smooth, as long as it's right in the middle of the UV space, because again, we're going to be using a circular map here, like a ramp in a node in Maya to actually create the transparency. Actually, in this case here, no transparency, right? This is just like, oh, I'm tripping. We're not going to use transparency. But if you're colorizing stuff, for example, like using ramps to colorize it, like I did in the past, right, to create the different variations for the different eyes, then it might look a little weird, but it never did. I mean, like, I think it should be working fine. But if you can, just make it smooth. I like to have like everything square like this, including the body and the face, because it's most likely it's going to be seamless when you export, because all the settings I'm using in Arnold are just like linear. I'm not using anything smooth, because in the past I had like all kinds of trouble with like micro, it's like seams, because of the way that you subdivide stuff. Sometimes ZBrush doesn't have exactly the same algorithm. It's like it's supposed to be Catmull Clark, but it's like there's a tiny little difference sometimes. So I don't trust that at all. I'd rather have everything square. So that's the UV for this guy. And then I have this little disc in here, which is basically like just a little plane, actually a little lens, right? So it's like kind of like a little bit of a lens like that. So it looks like this. And then it just covers that hole in there, and that's completely black. And then here it should be actually closer to the surface, a little bit more like that. So I'm gonna even like rotate it. Let's do a little closer to the surface right here. I want to see a little border, but not by much. So let's just move it away here, and then something around here. So you see a little bit of a border because I have some displacement going on, but not too deep. This is just to cover that gap. And yeah, it's kind of like a little cap in there. And so for the carancula, basically what I have here for the map itself, it's let's see, modeling UV. So it looks like this. So basically, like I split it in half and I open it up, right? So this seam should be around down here. So that's the seam right there, under. And then it was a split and then unfolded. And then the reason that I did this, basically like I rotated this way, is because I'm using like a transparency map that I mentioned before that starts around here in the middle and then it becomes very transparent, right? So if I have something like this, I could potentially like have the entire map. That would be easier actually, it's like to control. But I don't know why I did like just in this corner. I think I was trying to keep things proportional or something like that. But there's no reason why you cannot do like the whole map, the whole area here. And that way it would be easier actually to find the correct spot for the ramp. In my case, I kind of like guess because it's kind of like right in the middle. Yeah, I have to plan that better. So, but the reason I did this like vertically like that is because like a map, you can just like apply a vertical gradient map, and you can create a transparency between those things. So let's see how it looks like when we render this stuff. So let's go back here, and then let me just undo this. Control Y, let's undo, and then let's just press Control Shift H to unhide the latest hidden stuff. So now let's do a little render here. So let's see, Arnold, open Arnold window. Let's see if I can get this going here. I was doing this render before, so let's see if it's going to start rendering here. I was testing if things were working. Okay, so I got the little eyeballs in there, and then I can actually zoom in right here. But what I want to show you guys is actually the carunculus in here, how they are working. Let's bring this guy here. And then let's zoom in right there. And I'm going to hide the eyeball itself so you can see how the transparency is working. You're going to see if I isolate this area, how this is blending. Let's wait until it resolves in there. Let's see what's my samples here for my render preferences. 6. Okay, 6 is good. Shouldn't take too long, I guess. Let's see. You can hide some stuff in the scene as well because you're not going to be looking at all of them, but let's just wait a little bit. So remember when I mentioned that I was painting those crappy veins in the carunculate itself in ZBrush? So you're going to see here the transparency effect that I was mentioning before. So some of the veins are coming from the carunculate itself, and some of them are coming from the sclera. So you're going to see there's kind of like a little multi-layer that's causing like this blending here. So it's kind of like this redness, right? And it looks like the transparency between the two objects is quite perfect, right? You don't see anything going on because I'm using a little trick here. Instead of like just using the transmission, which is the transparency channel in Arnold for the shaders, I'm actually using the geometry transparency as well. The difference between the two of them I'm going to be showing in the shaders soon is that the transmission actually makes the object transparent to create glass, for example, but the specular is still there, right? So you still have spec. But the geometry transparency basically like it eliminates everything, specular and everything that's with it, right? So I use that one because I'm already getting the specular from the eyeball itself. So if I just turn things transparent in the geometry, so I don't need to worry about like weird specular, for example, like in that little border of the caruncular object that should be around here, you would have some kind of highlight right here. But with the transparency, I mean, like it completely blends to everything, right? So that's the way it looks like. Let me just save this as a little reference view store. And then let's move this to around here so you can see this area and how it's rendering. And then I'm going to show all the shader nodes, actually. I'm going to break it down for you today. And also I'm going to break down the teeth stuff, right? Someone was asking about teeth, so I'm going to be doing that. So you see like all the little structure in there, just by having the mesh a little bit more high res, like I brought it here. Now I don't need to worry about like having to have, you know, it's like a vector displacement, right? It has support enough so the displacement can actually go inside of those little holes, right? And create the little caves that I have in there. And then here you can see the blend, right? Like you can see a little bit of the structure of the iris underneath, and then it becomes very milky and then transparent. Depending on the eye, obviously, you can have some more darkness in there. You can actually have a little bit go further with the transparency, so you can get like a little bit bigger iris, for example, right? And but we're gonna be looking at this one first, and then we're gonna jump into the one that is the latest one, my wife's, that has the different geometry in there, so you can see the difference between them. And underneath here, you see that I have a little tier line, and the tier line is the last piece here that we have to talk about. Let's see if I can find it. It's quite transparent. So the tier line is very simple. The way I sculpted it, or not even sculpt, it's just a model. It basically like what it is, if I turn off the subdivision, it's basically like a 90-degree angle here. So basically like it's just like a few polygons, right? So you have like one, it's basically like face and face. So like two faces like this. And it's not snapped to the surface just yet, right? But ideally, you once you're happy with this, you just snap, for example, like both, like this point and this point to the surface of the eyeball, this point and this point. But you have to see the geometry of the edge of the eye as well. So when you snap it, This one is against the eyeball, but this one is right in between the eyeball and the eyelid. So it has to be like right at the transition. And then this top here, this one is going to be on top of the eyelid itself, right? So it's going to be around there. So when you once you have this snapped perfectly, when you subdivide it, it creates like this perfect little ramp like this, right? But just the ramp itself is not, it's like enough to create the effect of the wetness in there. So let's do this. Let's hide this eyeball. And let's keep on just those two objects so you can see clearly what I'm talking about all this time. So I'm gonna hide this one too, just like this. And then, so I have two objects, right? So let's try to render this again. So basically like what it is just that little strip. And that part, I actually had it before, like this little appendix here. So basically like the geometry was going up like this. But in the recent stuff, I just eliminated that. Ideally, what you have to do if you want to do like correctly, this has to go all the way around because you also have a little bit of that effect in the top part, right? So if you're looking from below, if you want to get the correct result, you're going to have to model it. For Jessica, because I'm planning to do some renders from below, I think you're going to be doing this, like going all the way around. So basically, like you just build the same way, like very simple geometry, but following the entire perimeter, and then matching both the eyelid and the eyeball, right? So this stuff here, I don't know if we're going to use this one in the middle, but definitely from here all the way around here. So it's probably going to have like a semi-circle or oval in there. And then this is the transparency I was talking about, right? So basically like starting here, starts getting transparent, but it's not just the transmission transparent, it's like completely transparent to create that perfect blend between the objects. And then there's some subsurface scattering happening there as well. So let's look at the shaders, because you see, like even for this guy here, it's not like a mirror kind of thing. It has some wobble to it, right? It's because I'm using a bump to displace it slightly. It's either a bump or a displacement map. I'm gonna check in the shader. So let's unhide the stuff I just made hidden here. So let's start with the hero one right in the middle. Actually, you're gonna need one carbuncle at least. Let's keep this one visible. So let's explore the shaders. Just to make sure you have the right stuff, let me just do a quick render here. So basically that's what it is, right? We're gonna be looking at this shaders. So let's start with the carbuncle. That's the simple one here. Click on it. Remember the UVs look like this, vertical. I'm gonna close it and let's open my hypershade. So let's start with this shader network here for the carunculus. So let's do a graph input and output. So it's, see, like there's not a lot of stuff plugged in here, right? So I have like, let's open the attributes here so you can see everything. Let's make it smaller. And then, so here, let's just click on it. So here are the attributes. So let's see attribute editor, and let's explore it here. So the materials, right? So for the base, let's see if I'm using some of the base in here. So it's at 1 in here, but let's look at the subsurface scattering first. No, so in this case here, you just if it's 1 for subsurface gathering, that means it's overriding anything that's coming from here. So you can completely ignore this one. I normally plug the same albedo color in there just as a buffer if I need more or less subsurface. But in this case here, I'm not even using it. So ignore that one. For the specular, for the carunculus, I'm using like basically 1, so like a full on. And then for the color, I think it's like completely white. So yeah, it's completely white. And then for the roughness, I'm using like 0.010. And then for the index of refraction, 1.360. So that's the spec. For the transmission, I have ramp. So basically, like I have the color at maximum, so it's completely transparent, right? But I'm actually not completely transparent. So I mean, like it's gonna be, it's like driven by the weight here. So I'm gonna click on this one, and this one here is actually a regular ramp from Maya, right? Like it's one of those ramp shader, ramp textures here. So let's see under textures, you have this ramp in here. I just made like a black and white ramp. So I click that one and I add it to here. And I made it like a vertical ramp because remember, like my UVs are vertical. And that's basically like where I found that spot for transparency, right? Remember that this is gonna be the top of it around here, right? So it's gonna be the top, like the little tip that's like the most internal part in the eye. And then this is gonna be more towards the end of it. So you're gonna see that transparency happening. Actually, let's see if that's the case or is the opposite. Because now I'm confused if I did the opposite, because sometimes I invert this. So the color balance, let's see, effects. So yeah, there's an invert in here. So that means that whatever is black in here is turning white, and whatever is white is turning black. So I could do the opposite. I could just like uncheck this one and just like reverse those two, make black and white, and it should have the same effect. But that's basically what I'm seeing right there, right? So it's basically like making the transparency. So if I do a test right here, for example, let's do a little test like this. And you're gonna see rendering there. So I'm gonna tweak this little curve, this little line. So if I bring this one closer, right here's not changing. Let's see if this is the one I'm gonna have to do it. Oh, okay. It's not changing because I have to change two of them, not only one. So this one here, let's see. If I bring it all the way down here. Is it not changing? It's supposed to. That's weird. It's kind of like ignoring it. Let's see if I'm using the correct ramping here to do it. Because there's another one that's actually yeah, so that's the weight. Let's see. Oh no, that's a different one. Okay, that's a different one. I was actually poking with the wrong one before. So let's see the transmission. Let's click it again, and that looks different. So let's see this guy here. Is it the same one I'm using? I think this is the one I just poked around with. Why is it not working? Let me eliminate completely. Weird. Maybe I'm gonna have to refresh. I think that's the problem. Let's just refresh the scene. Let's do like a full update scene so I can reload all those maps. But sometimes it gets a little weird. Still, that's weird. It's not affecting. Let's see if I eliminate this completely, what happens. Oh, now it's working. That's weird. You know what it is? Sometimes that node, I noticed one thing. I had all my scenes saved before I updated to this latest Arnold, right? And all my scenes are working. The transparency was working fine and everything. But then when I updated to this latest Arnold, what happened is that it started giving me some errors with some of the ramps, like the ramps from Maya. So to fix some of that, I had to actually add a ramp from Arnold itself. So we can try that as well. So for example, like if it's not working with the ramp from Maya, you just click wait. And if you go to this guy here, instead of like using that 2D texture ramp that I used, you can go to the utility under Arnold, and then you're gonna find there is a little ramp in here. So basically like ramp float. So AI ramp float under utility. So if you click that one, now I can just, you see like it's V as well. So like it has the V in there. And then let's just try to render it here like that. And then I'm gonna expand this. Let's see if we can get anything a little bit different now. Now it's working, see? So that's basically what it was. I mean, like, that's the thing that sucks, you know? It's like just because I updated it, it didn't work. So, but I guess you can trust the Arnold one better. So in this case here, you see like I'm changing the transparency of it, but I'm still seeing stuff. The specular is still there, right? So basically like here is gonna create like my blend to look perfect. So I'm gonna have to bring this one back just slightly as well. It's gonna be more transparent around here. But then there's a second node that's actually creating the transparency of the object that I mentioned, right? So let's get to that. So let's click this guy here again. So this is the transition. So basically like it's a ramp. It has to be in V, right? Like vertical. And then, so we already spoke about the specular. We already spoke about the transmission. The subsurface scattering is like full on. So it's like at 1. I'm using for the scale 115, random walk 2. And then the radius is this color here. If you want to take note, I mean, I can even look at the RGB 0 to 1. It's like 0.442, 0.202, and 0.147. So that's what's working for me. And then for the color itself is that crappy map that came from ZBrush, this one, with that UV, right there. So the transparency is happening around here, and this is the solid part. And let's see if I'm changing anything in terms of color. Yeah, I'm underexposing a little bit because I thought it was too much. And then I'm actually shifting the color, actually the color gain, instead of like being full on white. So it's a little bit like it's 76% of white, right? So it's not like 77% of white. So it's not full on white. It's a little bit less than that. And then there's an offset here. So the offset has this color in here, which is kind of like a gray, slightly colored to yellow, something like that, or orange. So it has less blue, definitely. So those are the values: 0.104, 0.1, and 0.097. So I'm not sure if it's going to work for you, depending on how you're going to paint your map. But what this is doing is actually, if I change here, you're going to see it. It was saturated before like this, right? So if I add an offset, it gets more pink. So that's all I'm doing. You know, it's like just making more pink and probably adding a tiny bit of a tinge of yellow in there. Just get a little bit more orange. So you can do that by, you know, just like bringing a little bit more yellow here. If I do too much, it gets like orange like that, right? If you do just subtle like this, you can actually colorize it. And then for this exposure, so like by default, it was like a 0 here. For some reason, I decided to put like 0.065, just make it slightly darker. I don't know if you even changed that much, but that's what I had for this character. For Jessica, it's going to change, but so that's basically what I have for the color itself, and then everything else should be the same. And then going from subsurface, we're going to go to coat. And coat, I have an extra layer here, which is like very, very shiny. So like 0.002, that's very mirror looking. And then there is the index of refraction is 1.5. And then the weight's like 0.526. So that's like an extra layer. So it's like a secondary speck. So like speck on top of speck. So like very shiny and wet. And so that's the settings for it. Chin, nothing, because it's not velvet, right? Or satin. And mission, there's nothing. It doesn't emit anything. Thin film, nothing. Geometry, this one we need. So for the geometry, I have this opacity here with another map. Let's see which one is that. So this one here is another one of those crappy Maya nodes, which I don't know if it's going to work at this point here. Actually, see, like it's so random because in this case here is working, right? But what this one does is basically, like I said, it basically like makes everything transparent, including the specular. So it completely blends with whatever is in the background. And that's the effect I wanted to create to make sure that the E-red as a single object. So like the blend is very perfect, you know. It blends like two ways, right? It blends just the transparency itself with the transmission, and then it blends the object itself. Maybe making the transparency of the transmission is a little overkill. I think you can solve the problem by just having this transparency in the geometry here. I think it should work almost the same, you know, if not the same. So, but that's basically what I do, you know, it's like to make more transparent, or that's how I shortened her carancula yesterday. Make something like this, you know, it's like you can go like very short, bring those ones closer like that. But then obviously if you're making shorter, if you turn this around, you're probably going to see a hole, right? So you have to be very careful. So for example, if I start turning this around like this, now that transparency is going to, like, depending on the angle you are, it's going to look like a hole. You know, it's like, especially if you have an eyeball right there, it's going to look like a, you know, it's like, it's going to start looking weird. So you have to see how far you can go in order to have that, that natural transparency that's not actually eating up a piece of the geometry that's not supposed to be gone. So yeah, that's basically like what I have for those guys. And then let's look at the other objects here. So for the eyeball, let's bring it to the picture here. And let's look at all those guys. So let's look at the shader for the eyeball. And actually, I think for the eyeball, we can actually look at Jessica's because it's the latest and I already have the other object in here. But I'm going to talk about just the little tier line here. And then we're going to jump into Jessica's scene. So for this guy here, let's see the materials I have. So the tier line. So I have this, sometimes like, oh, mine is so weird sometimes, man. Let me just copy this tab so actually I don't need to bother with that stuff. It's so clunky, you know. It's like they keep changing mine, and every time it looks a little weird, a little worse than it was before. So so for the specular for the tier line, right? Just this little line in there. So I'm using a spec that's very strong, 76%. And then for the color, it's like in this case here, is it completely white? Yeah, it seems like completely white. It's not quite. Let's see. Yeah, not quite white, right? 97% of white. And the roughness is 0.040. So you see, like it's not like super shiny, like mirror liking, right? Mirror like that would be like the 0.005 or something like that. This one has a little bit of more broad spec. And then the index of refraction is a little bit higher, so like 1.60 right here. So in this case here, so that's the setting for the tier line. And then let's see transmission. I have the transmission full on. So basically, like if I go here and just like let's do this corner that has some shininess to it. Oh, actually, it's in the wrong spot. Let's do this. Let's see where we are at. Let's get this little corner right here. You see, like it's specky, but it's not like a super sharp spec. So that's basically the settings in there. And then transmission, it's 1. So basically like maximum, right? I can go like for no transparency to fully transparent. So like 1. And then the rest is basically like default. So subsurface, there's nothing because it's a transparent object. Code, nothing. So basically I'm using just the spec in this case. And then geometry. Now I have a noise in here. So the noise, I have a bump map assigned as a noise. So the noise that I have is actually a Maya noise. And it looks like this. So basically, like if you assign Maya's noise, you can use the same settings I'm using here. If you're using like real world scale, just remember that's going to be dependent of your UVs, right? So if I look at UVs again, so that's like it's using most of the extension of the UV. So I could go a little bit further around there, right? But for this size here, basically like my settings for the noise are like this. It's like 0, 1, 0.091. And then I'm not going to repeat all the values. You can actually just pause the video around there and screen grab it, right? And when you have the videos up. And basically like this one is a Perlin noise. And then the settings down here, they're all the same. But like those are the main settings for the noise. And then obviously if you go back here to the bump node, I'm not using like a super high bump depth, right? I'm using very minor. If I turn on the rendering here, you're gonna see, for example, if I go too high this way, see it almost like becomes like invisible because it's too bumpy, right? And then I think the value I found was like going negative slightly, but very slightly, just to create a little bit of the wave in there, but without going too crazy. So like around like 0.90. It just creates a little bit of a waviness in there. And then with that size of the noise, it kind of like breaks up in a very nice way. You know, it's like if you look at some of my renders, you can barely see, this is going to be like peeking through between like the eyelid and then the eye. And you're going to see just a tiny little speck, you know, you're not going to see all this stuff. One thing you can experiment with, and I think I thought about doing that, but I never did. You remember when I was talking about the transparency of the object under the geometry here? So the opacity in the geometry. What you can do, and I think this is a good thing if you want to go like full on to make sure that everything looks perfect, you could potentially make this UV here completely flat. So like completely straight. So you would straighten the whole thing. So make sure that it's just like a strip, right? Like it's just a square that's, you know, is stretched in there. And you could potentially use like a a ramp at the top and at the bottom. So for example, like you'd create a ramp that you would create some transparency here in this area and another transparency here in this area. And then you could potentially have a perfect match between the eyeball and this tear line, and between the eyelid and the tear line as well. So you could have like a very perfect one. That's not the case in here, so that's why sometimes I see a little bit of the border when I render, very slightly. And to correct that, I think like using that transparency of the geometry would be like a perfect solution. You know, I think it would really blend all together. So now we already look at those two minor things, right? Like the caruncula and the tear line. Let's jump into Jessica's scene. And you guys have any questions? Sorry, I forgot to ask. And let's see, scene. This is I. Let's go to Jessica.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Fine. I had a question, not about this, although it's pretty interesting. I mean, the complexity you add to this is amazing. I started like trying to get the shader right yesterday for the skin. I mean, not right, but first approach. And I started watching the videos you posted, like the first one when we started looking at the skin shader.
Yeah.
And you added some map to the subsurface scattering strength, to the weight. And I was wondering what that was, because I wasn't able to see it. I don't know if you showed it.
Yeah, we have the scene open here, so let's explore everything. So we can talk about the eyes, finish what we were talking about the eyes, and then we can explore the teeth, and then finish up with the skin, and update you guys on the entire skin shader, so you can have like the latest stuff that I did. So basically, like this one is the scene that I'm rendering for this type of result here. So everything you're going to be seeing here is basically this, right? So let's go one by one. So for the eyes first, I'm going to get to the skin very soon, so don't worry about it. And then let's see, eyes. Let's just isolate like one eye here. This guy. Actually, let's do the eye plus the background and the lights, so we can actually render it. Let's try, let's see, Arnold, this guy. Let's see if I can render this right now. Okay, it's rendering. Okay, cool. So you see I have my little blend in there, much shorter than it was before. And then I have the eyeball itself. So let's look at this thing here. Get this. That light is a little bit strong right now because I brought it pretty close. Oh, another thing before I do this, let's just explain this before. Someone was asking me how I have my lighting rigged to my camera. So for example, like if I look from another perspective here, let's see. Where's my eyeball? Now I lost it. Ah! See if let's get the camera. There you go. So so this is like perspective 1. Let's see, perspective 2. I think this is the one I'm using to render. So if I go to perspective, just perspective, so I can see the camera from another angle. Let's see. Get this guy. And let's see if we can find the camera somewhere. Right there. So the camera is there. And then let's see if we go. Oh man, I think I'm gonna have to create another one just so I can see what's going on with the camera itself. Right there. So you see like the camera is right there and there's a little light in there. So you're gonna go like different frames. You see like it pops. So basically like the camera is traveling with this little guy together. See like they go together. So I created this flashlight effect. So basically like this light, what it is just like an area light from Arnold. Remember like how to create it, right? So Arnold lights and then area light. So I created one of those. But then in the attributes, I made it into let's show you here. So instead of like the light shape be a quad, that's the default, I turned it into a disc. So it became like the little disc in there. And then I turned on the normalize again because, you know, it's like, I was just like, I'm not going to go super creative with the light. It's just like, I just wanted the effect of the flashlight. So basically, like, those are the settings I'm using here. But then it's actually constrained. So there are a couple of things in here. The intensity is, I'm using like, you know, some keyframes, obviously, because every single frame here has to be a little bit different intensity because it's getting closer and further from the subject. And then so I'm keyframing it. In the past, I would use like a set-driven key as well, so you can try that. But it's a little bit more complicated to set up, but not by much. I mean, it's okay. But it wasn't giving me like a perfect, you know, it's like intensity every time. So I kind of like removed it. But the thing is, like, the idea here is to have the camera, see the camera right here, and the light be a little bit offset from the camera. So for example, imagine someone is photographing from here, and then the helper is holding like this flashlight, a big flashlight to the side, slightly to the right. So that means when you render something, you're always going to get the shadow slightly to the left in this case here, right? And because of the size of the source of the light, you're going to get slightly softer, not quite sharp, right? So if it was like a tiny little flashlight, you would get like a very sharp shadow. But in this case, it's very, very, not very, very soft, but it's slightly softer just because it's a little bit bigger, right? So, and the cool thing about the flashlight effect is that it catches all this awesome detail we did with the skin, which is like, if you're rendering just with the HDRI, it's going to be a fight because every single HDRI is going to give you a different result. Some of them are more diffuse. You get like a cloudy day, for example, and this stuff is going to be wiped. You're not going to see anything. And then you're going to get some that's like sunlight, just like one point, and then you're going to see a lot of it, maybe more than you wanted. But with the flashlight like this, you can actually control. So if I have the flashlight, I always going to get the specular in the spots I want to see, for example, the teeth in there, right? And on top of that, I have the option to use the HDRI as a support for a global illumination. So that's a combination here. I'm using like a 0.5 intensity for the HDRI plus the flashlight. But going back here, so the reason why this is following the camera is that I just set a constraint. So basically, like, to create a constraint, you just click the camera, and then you click the light, already positioned and where you want it. And you can go to under animation here, and you can just say constraint and then parent. Just make sure you have the settings here. So basically, maintain offset has to be on, and then translate and rotate, like locked for both. And then you apply, and then basically like anything you do with the camera, the light should do as well. It's because I have like some keyframes, so it takes a little bit for it to update. But it's basically like, you know, it's like if you do something like this, let's see, create polygon sphere, and then create polygon cube. So I want to basically like constrain one to another one. So for example, I can just click the sphere and then the cube. You can just say constrain parent. And now if I move this guy here, it's just constrained to it, right? But if I have keyframes, sometimes it gets a little weird. And then you have to go over the timeline here to actually make things work, right? But that's basically what I did. It's super simple. And so the lighting really is very effective, you know, for this kind of scene here. So let's go back to the shader stuff. That's the meat and potatoes here. So that's the eyeball right there. Do another render. Oops. And let's see, my lighting is a little bit strong. Let me just get this back here. Lights, let's get the, see, I have the sky dome. So the sky dome here, oh, the intensity is actually at 1. So I'm using like full on. And this one here, you can find at the HDRI Haven. That's like a passage. Let's see, what's the file? Glass passage. So that's the one I'm using. And I'm using a little bit less intensity for the camera visibility. So if I scroll down all the way here, so I'm using like for the camera, the visibility is like at 0.4. Originally, I had like at 0.1 or something like that because I was underexposing to get more of the flash effect, right? So if you go down here, you're gonna start seeing the HDRI disappearing there. See, it's gonna get very, very low intensity. But you know, it's like I'm kind of like adding halfway, you know, so it got very faint right now. So I'm using like maybe like 400 something. That's what I'm using right now for that kind of effect. And then for the light itself, I'm gonna just turn the flashlight. See, that's my constraint there. I'm gonna turn the intensity a little bit lower than that. So it's at 10,000. Let's do like 8,000. And I just have to remember not to save this. So basically like 8,000 is around here, but then if I get closer to it, obviously gonna need less intensity, otherwise it's gonna get overexposed. Let's see this. Okay, so we are back. Let's pause it and let's explore the shaders. So this is the latest stuff I did. So remember, like I show you guys all the objects involved with it, right? So this one is not conformed yet, so I have to adjust that. See, there's a gap. And if you have a gap in there, you are at risk of, when you use the transparency, having like some kind of weird artifacts when you rotate towards this direction, for example. You're gonna see inside of the transparency in there. So you're probably gonna see something in the void in there, right? So you don't want that. Want to make sure that it's very close to the surface. The difference in here is that instead of just having those objects, I have another one here, which is this guy. So check this out. It's a lens I added in there. So this lens here is completely transparent, and it's just like laid on top of it's actually intersecting with the rest of it. I thought for a second about like not intersecting, kind of like just riding on top like this, and just like conforming really close. But I think it ended up like adding some intersection. But let me show you what it does, like the difference that this makes. At least like it looked nicer to me, but that's my, it's like more, like you can see like everywhere in every single thing I do is like, it's more like an artistic approach than a super technical approach, right? Other than looking for, values and things to help. But it's like the stuff that looks better to me. I don't care too much about like judging if it's the correct or incorrect way. But when you look at the anatomy of the eye, is actually you have all those things. It's like you have the outer sclera, for example, like the transparency we had here before. It's not simply like a shallow wall, right? It has a depth to it. I think it's like 0.5 millimeters, so it's like half a millimeter. That's the thickness of that little film on top of it. So if you build correctly, that basically, like instead of like just having the eyeball like we had, you would have to extrude it very slightly to create that little wall in there, right? And then underneath the wall, so for example, like the wall I think is like 1.38 for the refraction for that tiny little wall, but then the liquid inside of it, contained in there, it's 1.360 something. So it's like or 350. I think I use an average. Let me see if I can find the picture here to show you. They use like they have like very slight different index of refraction between the pieces. So I normally use an average between them. But I think let's see this guy here. This is a little technical, but I mean, like it's good to see. So for example, like the cornea itself, you see like it has a little wall in there. It's not just like a film, right? It has a little wall. So that's like 138 for the refraction. But then the liquid inside here is 134. So in the past, I would use like 136 for the average of the two of them, but it was not giving me this type of result. Actually, I can try to, it's like in the future renders, maybe like create this little wall and then do the exact same index of refraction and see if it improves anything. And then do 134 for this area. So basically what I did, I created this bubble inside of it. And that added some more interesting effect for me, So you see like you have all those little lines coming across the surface that I had before. I cheated it by creating a map in Photoshop with I can show you how I made it actually. So it's just like to add some extra detail in there, but see like it's not like great or anything. It just adds more stuff. It gets more complex. And this is just a bump map applied on top of that. There's a lot of room for improvement. I could paint or sculpt something much closer to what her eye is. But I just want to show you this as an example. So check this out. Now we are seeing this with that little lens in the middle, right? So I'm just going to pause it. I'm going to store it like that. So I'm going to hide that lens right there. And let's try to render it again. So I have it saved. Let's render it again. So you see like it already changed. And probably is going to get darker as well, because like I said, like the caustics effect is not affecting the way I expected. For example, just by having this object the iris enclosed by this other object, it's not creating the caustic effect I was expecting. So by creating that little bubble in there, now I'm getting more of it's a little lighter. It's because the caustics are actually spreading, you know. If all those objects are like gray, you probably would be able to see like the caustics in there. I did with a plane before, and I could see it. So you see, like it's a little bit lighter this way, and the refraction is very different as well. So that's why I added that bubble. It's adding more depth, I think, you know. So that's the difference. So it's up to you if you want to try that. That's how I'm rendering her at this point, and I'm liking the results. So, but let's talk about the shaders. So for the sclera itself, I already show you like the UVs and everything. So let's explore this. So for the base, I'm using 1, but let's see, subsurface is at 1. So again, this one can be completely 0, and you're still gonna get the same result. So ignore the base because the subsurface is at 1. And specular, 0.65. Roughness, 0.020. And then the index of refraction, actually I'm using the 138. That's the most external one, right, that I showed before, based on that picture. So 138, that's the most external one. But I don't think it's gonna produce the same effect if you don't have this little wall extruded. So I might extrude it next. It has to be very small intensity, actually. And then for the transmission I'm using a circular ramp just to create this effect. So let's see if we have this one up like this. Let's just render it, and let's select a little area that we don't take too long to render. Maybe something like this. Let's do a play here. So that's gonna be what I'm gonna be playing with. So transmission, let's go here. And you see it's, I think this was before, after I learned that the ramp from Maya was causing trouble. So this is straight from Arnold. So it's like the AI ramp float from Arnold. And then basically what I'm using here is this. So basically like this point is at 0.32. This one's probably like 0.2. It's gonna be different from your map depending on the position you have everything, right? But if I play with this, so basically like this is what's gonna do. Look, it's gonna reveal more or eat more of this stuff. So like you see, like I'm blending things much further, or I can actually grow the iris by doing this. So it's actually revealing a lot of the iris right there. And then back. So with this, you can actually, you know, it's like really create like an interesting effect. If I remove it completely, now it's completely transparent, right? So if I bring this more towards here, not transparent, completely opaque. And then if I go back up, that's completely transparent, including everything around it. So for example, like if I extend it, you're gonna see like the eyeball itself is transparent, right? And this is the border of the disc that I made for the iris. So basically, like if you wanna create another one here, let's make this one a 0. What was that? 0.2. This one's 0.32. I think that's what we had before. And then I'm just gonna bring this one down like that, so 0.32. So it's kind of like just with the ramp, you know, it's like you can play and find what's the best spot. And then obviously to create a little halo effect, that's gonna be a combination between the shadow from the float ramp map, and also the color that you have baked into your you know, it's like iris, right? So I'm just gonna close this. So now you know how that's being done. And then, so this is transmission, so I'm gonna close it. Subsurface, I'm using 100%. And then the scale is 0.130, which is a little higher than the caruncula. You have to understand that it depends on, for example, like if it's something with microstructures like the iris, for example, I'm probably gonna use a much smaller scale, because if it's too much, those microstructures is going to get very glowy. So you have to make sure that the scale is very tiny. It scatters just enough, you know. And then, so I played with those values because I look at stuff visually, and if they don't look right, I just poke it around. And I'm actually using 0.1 here, which is, that means it's adding a little bit of front scatter to the whole thing. And so like for the maps themselves, so let's expand the subsurface color. So I have this cornea map, which looks like, let's see if it's going to open, like this, right? The one that came from ZBrush. Remember the UV, like this is very tiny, is the back of it, so I don't care about it. But I have most of the detail right in the front. And this is white right there. So let's see if I'm tweaking it a little bit. So color balance. Yeah, so I'm basically like underexposing that by 0.7, which is quite a lot, like from 0 to 0.7. And so I'm underexposing for some reason. I think, again, like probably like looking at visually and seeing what's working, what's not. So we can even see here. Let's try this around here. Let's see what we get around this area. So if I render it, let's see if I go back to 0. X. Yeah, you see, like it was too white before. It was kind of too overexposed. So I think I just underexposed it a little bit to get a little bit of that result. And then let's see, for the rest here, effect's going to be fine. But we're going to all be fine. So like for the color gain, I'm using a map. And this map here is actually another AI ramp RGB this time instead of being float, because I have to use color. And I'm shifting the color slightly towards blue in here. So you see, like sometimes instead of like just going to ZBrush and repainting stuff, I just rather have the same eyeball for everybody, and then I can reuse it. Obviously, like, you know, depending on the character, sometimes I'm going to have to repaint some veins and stuff. But this is very generic, right? I plug to the character and I can see results straight away. So again, like if I do this with the ramping here, let's just copy this value. Just by clicking on it, Maya already saves in there. So I just click and saved in there. So if I shift this one, let's say back to white, let's see what happens. See, it got like a little bit too pink now, right? It's very pink. Just save this one. Let's go back to that color we had before, this one. So between this one and this one, see, like it's a little bit more blue now. So I probably like tweaked because of that reason. It looked a little bit too pink, so I had some more, you know. And then in this case here, this is black, right? So the black in here, let's put a very weird color here so you can see where it is. It's right there, right at the edge. So basically what I'm doing, I'm actually adding a little bit extra darkness to create that little halo in there. In the actually, this one is coming from the sclera. I think I split it. I put a little bit of the dark around in the sclera, and then a little bit of the dark in the iris itself. That's what I probably did. I thought I didn't use for the sclera itself. It seems like that's what I did, but it's working. And then, so this is the one that's plugged into the color gain, and then I have a color offset as well. So the color offset, what I have here is another ramp RGB from Arnold. And this one is also, it's a circle as well, so it's circular. And then I have this map here. So let's play with those values. Let's see what it does. So if I bring this one closer here. So if I just do, let's make white here. Yeah, so basically like this one, it doesn't offset anything. So this is, if it's black, it's preserving the original color. And if it's white, I'm actually overexposing things, right? So if I click this one just to save in there, should be saved now right there. So if I go black with it, see, like it becomes too saturated. Not saturated, but gets a little too dark. So I'm actually just exposing a little bit to get more of like the white sclera, right? Like because my wife had very white ones. And but I mean, like this one would look more natural for like an older guy probably or something. But in her case, I cleaned it up. I put some eye drops in her, right? And then I got a little bit wider like this. Just, you know. So those little ramps always help. So that's why I have them plugged in multiple different places. So right there, we have the subsurface already talked about. And then let's see, coat. I don't have any coat applied, so ignore that. Shin, nothing. Emission, nothing. And then geometry, nothing as well. So basically, like that's basically what I'm using for the shader for the eyeball itself. So eyeball, and then the which is sclera, and then the cornea, right? So let's look at the other elements here now. So I have this one. Let's just hide it so it doesn't take too long to render. It's going to look weird to render just this now, but at least we can see what we are dealing with. So right now, you're seeing this little halo here. I'm going to have to fix it. This is actually part of that little the circle that I have in there. Maybe what I can try to do is actually, instead of like having this little line in there happening, maybe I can try to blend this transparency is just slightly, or get closer to it and just like stick into the surface. But it's being created by this bubble that I just added, right? So it has a little border in there. It's kind of like a Fresnel effect. So I'm gonna have to fix it. But let's see. So right now, what I have for it is just like, it's a completely transparent object with so there's no speck apparently. I'm using just, oh, maybe that's the problem. No, actually, it shouldn't be a problem. Let's see my code. No, I don't have code or specular. I think I'm just using it for the index of refraction, but without having any extra spec. The spec would add this kind of effect in there, right? But because I already have the spec coming from the other object, so I think I eliminated it. But all I wanted from it is the index of refraction. So that's the one we're going to control how much is going to refract, right? Basically, like this one should be 134, I believe, 0.34. So that's all it is for this guy here. It's completely transparent, and it doesn't have anything else. So no coat, no subsurface, no nothing. So it's like a very, completely transparent object with no spec. But then I'm gonna have to again like see what's going on with those little borders, because I don't like it. So, but I'm gonna fix it eventually. So let's go back to just the iris itself. So now you have this object, right? So oh, it's actually coming from the iris. Look, like there's a border in there. It might be some artifact from the spec, I think. It might be too specky. I think yeah, that was the problem. Yeah, I can see that right there. I thought of for the other one, but it's actually from here. So let's look at the materials I have in here. I guess that's what it is. I mean, I'm using a lot of spec in here. Let's just reduce it and see if we get anything different. Oh yeah, that's gonna look better. But the thing is, like, I want some spec. I might have to use like a little map, maybe a ramp, to just control where it starts and where it ends. Because I want to have a little bit of specularity, because that adds a little extra fake caustic sometimes. Because if the light is hitting from a certain angle, if it's in a broad spot, it's probably going to look a little bit more illuminated in there. So I think that's what I'm doing. But I definitely need a ramp, because I don't want that area that's completely flat and has no detail to look so shiny the way it is here. That's all that's missing. So specular, I mean, like, it's going to be dependent of what you want. In this case here, because I have already a lot of bump map, so I had to crank it to be able to see any specular. And then, so the roughness is a little broad, so like 0.300, so it's definitely nothing, it's like shiny. And the index of refraction is 1.5. Let's see if I have full-on subsurface. Yeah, so subsurface is full-on, so you ignore the base again. Transmission, nothing. Subsurface is complete at 1. And I'm using it for the radius. It's slightly on the green side in her case. So instead of like scattering blue, I'm scattering a little bit more towards green. And for the scale, is actually much smaller than the scale I use for the rest of the body, like the skin and everything. The skin is like 1.30 or something, and this one is 0.030. And then for the map itself, it looks like this. Let's cancel it, and let's bring the map up like this. So you see, like, I added basically, like, I started with the noise in Photoshop. I can actually do this very quickly, I think. Let's see. So just to create that effect, since it's a circular thing, right? So basically, like, you start with the map like this, and you can just like let's say like add a noise, a very strong noise, something like that. And then you can just go like filter and blur and radio blur. And you can do like zoom and mount at 100% and then best. And you apply, you get something like this, right? But then you can use a little bit of this distort. Where is it? Distort. And then you can use a little bit of ripple or wave. I think like I used maybe like, was it wave that I used? I think it was ripple. Just to add a little bit more of distortion of it. Let's try this. Yeah, so it's something like that. See right there, it looks a little bit wobbly and wavy. So you can add that just to create a little bit of that effect. And then the size, I can go large with it. Just to create a little bit more irregularity, something like that, you know. So I added those little guys mixed with the map that I had painted, and then I came up with something like this. Right, something like that was blended like very strongly. And then, so let's close this one. So that's the map. So very simple. And then let's see here, the colors and everything. So I'm actually underexposing a little bit. So from that map, by default, it would be something like this. So it's a little bit too bright for my taste. And I kind of like underexposed it a little bit, made it darker. Again, visually, right? Like checking renders. Because you have to understand, if you render without the lens on top, it's going to look like, oh, it's a little bit too dark. But as soon as you put the lens on top, the caustic effect is going to add a lot of lighting to it. So sometimes you have to underexpose it so that you can compensate with the caustics on top. And then for the rest of the stuff here, I don't think I have anything else plugged. So that's the subsurface scattering. And then for the coat, I have some coat in here, but I don't even know if I should be using it. I think that's the coat. The coat is introducing a lot of the artifact, I think. Yeah, I think I gotta play with this and probably like eliminate some of the coat and the speck, at least from this border here. I don't think you need this, but I mean, like if you want to use it, that's kind of the settings I use. 0.5, so that's the spec was 0.3. This one is 0.5, so it's even more broad. So it's a secondary spec, and then the index of refraction at 1.5. But I'm almost sure this is introducing artifacts in here. So I'm gonna be playing with with both the coat and the spec, and see if I really need them. If I don't need to eliminate, if I need, then I'm gonna just create a ramp map and just blend this border in here, so it actually doesn't have spec at the border. Just keep the spec, it's like focus around here. So no shin, no emission, and then for the geometry, I have a bump map. So the bump map I added here, it's basically like the same map I did that one. So basically, like this one is it's a black and white version of that. Actually, I ended up using the same. So basically, the same map I'm using for color, I'm actually using as a bump map as well, just to create that little extra number of lines that I had before, right? That I show you guys. Like you have all those little extra lines. It's because of this little bump map. See, like those little. It should be more undulated than that. It should be more like wavy, but I was too lazy to do it. But at the end of the day, it works very nicely without doing that. But just because of the depth and everything. But if I'm more careful, I can get a much better result. So let's look at the rest. Seems like everything's fine. So alpha is luminous, because if you're using bump map, so always try to use this one instead of like color. So basically, like the bump respects the black and whites only. And then for the bump height, I'm using a lot here. So just for comparison, let's see this. So store snapshot, and then let's bring this one back. So actually -5. If I bring back, it's gonna get much shinier, I guess, because the bump's gonna be smaller. So it's already shinier, right? So that's not gonna help us. So yeah, I think I brought it down all the way. Yeah, you see, like you can still see some artifacts if I have like at 1. All that little glow around it, it's because of it's from the spec and the coat. So it's like all the way down is actually disguising it, but it's definitely a combination of things that's happening there. So that's basically what it is for the iris. I think that's all the settings. Let's see, anything else? No. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. Let's go back here. Let's get before I forget completely. Let's see, Control Z. I have the lens. Let's bring this guy back. So remember, like when you have a transparent object, it can be this one, it can be the tier line, or it can be the little lens that I have inside in there. Just make sure that you go to the attributes of the object. So for example, like press Control A, right? So you can go to the attributes and go to your Arnold tab and make sure that you have your opaque little checkbox in here off. Because by default, any object you bring into Maya is going to be on, right? So make sure you have it off, because otherwise your shadows are not going to look transparent. So you're gonna, you're not going to be correct. So if you have like any transparent object like this one, and the tier line like this is opaque, see? This one should be opaque as off as well. But then this guy here, this is completely opaque, right? So another thing you have to see here, see like this guy, if I scroll down, is not casting any shadows. So basically like this guy here, there's no reason for me to cast any shadows with it, right? This guy here, it is casting shadows. And then this one probably casts shadows as well. And probably this outer one casts shadows as well. But the tier line is not casting shadows because of the one interfering with anything, right? It's just like a little, it's like a crystal clear, water in there. So I don't want to have like any shadows. But I mean, like you would calculate correctly if I had it. It's like I just turned it off like a long time ago, I believe, but that's how I have it set. So basically, like I think I spoke about this one, and I think that's it for the eyes. Like, do you guys have any questions? I mean, like, did I forget anything about the eyes? I spoke about everything about it.
It's a lot to take,
Oh yeah, it's a lot. Yeah, it's like it's a lot of information. I mean, I told you like in the first week that's going to start very slowly, but then it's going to build up. And this class is it's interesting because the students normally try to keep up at the beginning, but then it gets like it's like a lot of stuff right after, and then they kind of like get lost a little bit. Not lost, but I mean like they cannot follow the thread. But then the cool thing is that right after the class is over, a lot of the students go back to the videos and start rewatching them and then doing the exercises and actually following more correctly, it's like slowly. And then they manage to get the cool results, because they're really following the whole process. But yeah, it's like it's the kind of stuff like you have to take in like slowly, So let's go look at the skin, because we want to make sure that we talk about everything. And the skin is a yes.
One quick question.
Mm-hmm.
The little plate that is inside the pupil.
Oh, yeah, the pupil, right? Yes. So this little guy, no, not this guy. This guy here. Yeah. So that's the material. Let's see. I think it's like super plain color. It's probably just the base here at the. It's oh no, I'm not using base. What is that? Pupils. What do I have in there? So specular, nothing. Transmission, nothing. Subsurface, nothing. I think like that's basically like completely black. So I just like brought everything down to black. There's no nothing. It's just like a plain black void.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's just like bring everything down, and you should have like a black void in there. So the skin, we're kind of like rushed now because it's like 11:23. I'm gonna try to go over it. If it gets too rushed, we can repeat like the first thing tomorrow. Talk a little bit about the skin, but let's try to go over it. Base, ignore again. So we're not going to be dealing with it. Specular, I'm using like 0.6 for the skin. And you have most of those values already, but this is an update of whatever is working right now for me. Roughness is 0.120, so it's quite specky. Because remember, like if you look closely in a macro photography, the skin is very, very specky. But it doesn't look specky because it breaks up like, it's like with the micro displacement and everything, micro bump. It looks more rough than it is, right? But if you look really closely, it's super shiny and like shrink wrap kind of looking. Index of hello.
Quick question: is there a reason why you prefer using a spec weight map, or sorry, color map, as opposed to a roughness map?
Style of roughness. Oh, the roughness map. It actually helps to create the effect that's more diffuse or more like sharp, specular, right? But it's kind of like to me, it's more like it's kind of like an easy, how can I say it? it's a simulation of it, kind of like a cheap way to do it, right? It's the same with the shin that they have in here. The shin, actually, the purpose of this shader is to simulate like there's like a micro fuzz in the surface, so you can simulate like velvet and satin, stuff like that. It's not adding geometry, but it's just like adds the little simulation of a micro thing in there. And then when you have like something like the spec, I mean like the how you say, like the micro displacement that I was talking about, instead of using the roughness map, what it does is basically like I'm actually treating it as a physical thing. So for example, like if I use like I just modulate and bring the height of the bump higher or lower, I'm actually making more diffuse or less diffuse. So I'm adding roughness by increasing the height of the bump. And then I'm removing the roughness and making more shiny by removing the height of the bump. So that's my preference, you know, because I want to make sure that, you know, it's like I can see things more correctly. If I get too close, you know, it's like if I go really close to the skin, I want to make sure that it reads like there's actual forms in there, creating that effect of diffuse specular, more than having something that's just like roughness map, you know. I think that's my preference.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I use like the roughness is all the way across the same for the whole thing, for the whole face, but then the bump actually, you know, regulates what's more or less rough in the whole thing by using geometry actually, or like bump in this case. So for the color in the spec is basically like that map I painted. So if you look at one of them here, like that simple map with the spec that you can look in the previous class, it's very like you know, noisy. And then let's see, in my color balance, yeah, for some reason I'm not using alpha less luminous, but it's kind of like that's normally what I do. But this case here is working apparently. So that's all it is. So I have like hue dims, 5 tiles, and that's it. I'm underexposed, you know, everything is default. So this one is working fine. For the transmission, nothing. Subsurface is cranked all the way to 1. And then for the radius, I might add a mapping here at some point. But at this point here, this is the default color that Arnold actually, the manual suggests to use for skin. 1, 0.35, and 0.2, kind of like an average. And then I'm actually adding quite a bit of, like 15% of front scatter. So if you go positive, you're adding front scatter. If you go negative, you're adding back scatter, kind of exaggerating more. The scale 120, I think it was higher before, so I brought it down. I thought it was working, it was like too spread out, like especially in the eyelids. And now it looks a little bit more correct at 120. But my ballpark is normally like between 115 and 150. Sometimes can go as far as 150, depending on the character. But I think like a ballpark would be maybe like here, maybe like 120 to 135 would be my ballpark. If it's like a real world scale, it's kind of my preference, you know. Some people might think that's a little too scattery. Some people might think that it needs more scatter, but that's kind of like what I like. And subsurface color, that's when I'm where I'm plugging the remap color, right? Like if you go to your, let's see, to the shader network here, and you go to the texture, not texture, I think it's under shader. No, sorry, utility. So there is a, oh, no. The remap color is actually a Maya shader. So basically, like if you go to Maya, you go to utilities. So you're gonna go back here, remap color, that one. So if you click that one, that's basically the one that's gonna be plugging to this channel right here. So like you're gonna click subsurface color and you're gonna choose that shader first and you're gonna get this, right? And then that's where you're gonna be removing some of the redness by bringing down this middle point. So you add a middle point in there by clicking on it. Make sure that's at the 50% position, and then you bring it down. And it's gonna be depending on the model that you have, right? If you bring it down a lot, then it's gonna get more green and blue, like more desaturated in the reds. And same I did for this guy here. So I punched the blue a little bit higher. So 40, you know, from 500 to 540, and then this one from 500 to 460. And then here in the color, that's where you're gonna plug your actual albedo. So your actual albedo. So I clicked in there, and then my albedo looks like this that we painted yesterday, right? And I painted a little bit more afterwards, like another hour, 20 minutes or something. So that one, if I look at the exposure, everything is the default. So there is no offset, exposure, everything is default. So nothing to see here. So basically like all my adjustments I'm doing with this node actually. And then let's see for the coat, I'm using roughness 0.4. So it's very broad. That's why you're getting like those soft, let's see, which one is that? Let's close a couple of things because I have too much stuff going on. See this one there. So that's why you're getting this broad speck around there. It's kind of mostly from the coat, around the forehead, and it's like it's kind of like a secondary specular. So basically, like the tight ones is coming from the speck, but the broad stuff is coming from the coat as a secondary speck. That's very broad. So 0.4. 1.55 I'm using for the index of refraction, and then the color itself, the weight itself. So let's see this map here. I did some modifications on it. So this it's again the same specular map I used before. So I'm using the specular map, but a copy of it as the coat. But alpha is luminance in this case here, and I thought I was actually tweaking it, but apparently I'm not. I thought I was actually underexposing this one a little bit, but it seems like I'm keeping pretty, oh, actually, I'm cranking here, yeah. So it starts at 0 for the exposure, but actually I'm cranking to 1. And then obviously if you want more spec, you're gonna be cranking this all the way. You can go like, even though it goes until 5 in here, I think you can do even like higher numbers. Yeah, you're gonna keep going forever. But I think in my case, I'm using like 1. So overexposing the map a little bit because I painted a little bit too, softly. So this is the coat. The shin I'm using like 0.030, which is like, it's kind of like overkill to me. He adds a little bit of this interesting like little velvety quality to it that the manual recommends to use for skin because of the peach fuzz kind of effect. But because we're going to be using actual peach fuzz in here, we might not need it, but I still add a little bit of it. So like with the roughness a little high, so it just adds a little bit of a Fresnel when it comes from, when you see from glancing angles. Emission nothing, thin film nothing. And then here for the geometry is the same stuff that we talked about before, which is the AI noise. So I have that one plugged with those settings. I think they are the same, but we can double check. So octaves, I'm using 7, like lacunarity, like 129. And then for the scale 05, 05, 05, object space, and then vector, and that's about it. So basically, like this is the micro bump, right? So that's plugged into the bump value. So that's the bump value. We already did this before, but I'm gonna be going over very fast. And then for the bump height, the bump depth, that's when you plug the bump height map that we painted as well. So if I look at this one, that's that map. That's super simple. I show you guys no alphas being used. It's just like plain painting, right? So we got a lot of that, just like black and white information painting in there. You can also find that information in the video. And then for the rest of the parameters here, sometimes when I paint stuff, if it's something super dark like that one, I could have painted, for example, like more contrast between blacks and whites, and I would not have to expose it so much. It would be like a more like normal kind of thing. But in this case, because I painted like the difference between whites and blacks is very, very minor, kind of like it's all kind of compressed within the dark tones, I had to overexpose it. So I exposed like by 5 in this case, and then it worked fine. But again, like I have always my render on the side, and then I keep like doing quick renders or leave it rendering there, just like really tweaking this and seeing how much I can get, right? So everything is visual. And to test like bump maps, obviously you just start with a gray model with some spec in there, and without having any subsurface or anything. That's the only way to see exactly what you're getting with the depth of it. And I think that's it for the skin. So that's the update, and you guys can try, it's like plugging some of those values in here, and just make sure that you get the scale correct, right? Because sometimes I see some renders and they look very, very plasticky and very subsurfacey, right? So make sure like you use the same scale, like 0.120. And obviously, if you don't have any map plugged, it's going to look very silicon-like, right? Remember when I was doing my first renders with her? I have it posted actually on Instagram. It looks very silicon-looking. And I actually have to make it dark silicon, right? So you can actually see the pores render and everything. But you're only going to start seeing more of a realism apply to it. It's when you have some decent albedo being painted, right? So if you start painting some albedo, then things going to start looking okay. I'm pretty far from painting, like to have this map finished, right? All the detail I painted in here kind of faded away a little bit, so I'm going to have to reinforce the freckles and stuff. But yeah, it's just like a matter of like putting all those pieces together, you know. At least like the video is recorded, you guys gonna be able to rewatch chunks of it since I went in a certain order, right? Like talking about the, you know, caruncula and blah, blah, blah. So if you watch those things and you follow them, you know, it's like paying attention, I think you can actually reproduce fairly close, you know, to what I'm doing. Obviously, it's gonna be dependent on the type of maps you're painting, how good you are at painting the maps, you know, it's like if you added the right colors to the maps. So all those parameters I use work for my color maps. That's why I kind of like, I show you the maps the way they look. So you guys can see if you can get the maps like in a ballpark similar to that. And the parameters I have, you should get something pretty close, you know. So that's why I'm sharing everything. But obviously like each art is gonna do slightly different. You know, it's like the painting is gonna be slightly different. And the results gonna be different, obviously. But I'm seeing some of the results like from my previous students, the ones who actually managed to go forward. We didn't get too overwhelmed with the amount of information. Some of them managed to, you know, get the models more worked after, and it looks very nice. You know, it's like some of them had some trouble. I ended up like asking them to send me the model and the file, and like during the class, I actually opened the file and I said like, okay, let's look what's wrong in here, and I kind of fixed it for them and sent back. You know, so you know, sometimes that can happen with me. Obviously, it would be nice if you guys just ask in the group so we can actually try to fix it together, because a lot of us have a lot of experience. Some of you guys have more experience than I do with Arnold. And so feel free to ask in there. But, you know, it's like if there's something that we cannot solve, you just like send me the file and you can just explore it live together, you know, and just try to find a solution for it. But if you follow the instructions, I think you should be pretty much like at least in the ballpark, you know, to get the stuff going. So thank you so much, guys. Another full day today, I guess, like a lot of information to digest. But the video is going to be there for you guys, and I'm going to post also the video for the time lapse of the sculpting of the iris. You know, one thing that I tell you is that people in the past two classes, they had more trouble with the pore itself than they had with the sculpting of the iris. The sculpting of the iris, a lot of people managed to actually nail it pretty well, but the pore is always that thing, man. It's about the. We might actually tomorrow do a little bit more of a demo of a pore or something. It's gonna be the third time we do it, but I think it's worth it. You know, it's just like you have to get that fall off like very broad and spread out. If you get just a tiny little fall off, you're gonna start seeing just that little pinhole in the middle. And without a lot of, it's not going to mix with the structures outside of that pore. You know, it's like it's not going to create a little network of pores. It's going to be just like isolated and like a little polka dot. You know, so it's important to create this nice little fall off. So we can explore a little bit tomorrow before we go into the other stuff. So tomorrow, my plan is to actually do some cleanup in the eyelids and show you how I sculpt the eyelids to make a little bit there's a little detail in there I don't see people doing, which is creating this little membrane, you know, it's like in the sculpt itself. So just lift a little bit and put right against the eyeball, and it creates this little nice effect. It's very thin surface that basically like when the scatter hits it, it creates this tiny little, you know, it looks nice. It integrates with the eye pretty well. So I see you guys tomorrow. Thank you again, and I know you're gonna be probably like rewatching this stuff a couple of times because yeah, it is a lot of information today, especially. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
guys. Let's see. Oh, ending right there.